alcoholic, alcoholism, alcohol use disorder, lots of different terms. They seem to be changing all the time, and all of them seem to be offensive to certain people at certain times. So I'm going to try to walk through some of the weeds right here, give some of the background information, and hopefully clear up some of the confusion. If you've ever tried to look up statistics about alcoholism in the US, or even just come in contact with some of the clinical literature, I'm sure that you've seen or heard the term alcohol use disorder, AUD. So what is AUD? The big diagnostic manual that kind of classifies and defines all the different mental health illnesses and disorders is the DSM, okay? The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM. And it's actually a relatively controversial reference, because there's always a lot of debate on what exactly constitutes a disease or a disorder. For example, if I brought a new drug to market that I can prove, reduces oppositional behavior in children, and then the DSM adds a new diagnosis called oppositional defiant disorder, well, that drug went from making me, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars to possibly billions of dollars, okay? So there's a ton of pressure and lobbying to those guys when they're writing their updates for their manual. But it's what we use and it's what we have right now, and eventually it is what sets the stage for the lingo. It's been updated 4 times since it was first published. The last one was in 2013, the DSM-5. This latest update changed the categories of abnormal alcohol use, okay? Alcoholism used to be broken up into alcohol abuse and alcohol dependence, and those two are now combined into more like an umbrella term, alcohol use disorder. Actually, just that term abuse, it's really gotten phased out since these new changes went into place. Because that word sets someone up, by extension, you can refer somebody who abuses as an abuser, okay? Or he is an addict, or he is an alcoholic. And those words can have a negative connotation or just be stigmatizing to a lot of people. So they're really not used as much anymore in the clinical setting, that is. Obviously at the street level, it takes a really long time for language to change, and there's a lot of reasons for that. So we have this, relatively new alcohol use disorder diagnosis, which is actually supposed to be more like a catch-all to get people in those earlier stages. Lots of people, for example, who might be insulted by that term alcoholic. I think it's around 15 million or more adults in the U.S. meet that criteria, so it's a pretty significant number. And then from there, they break down AUD by severity, okay? So there's mild, moderate, and severe based on specific criteria, okay? There are 11 sort of specific and objective symptoms that the clinician would be reading off of to make that diagnosis. Things like, do you drink more than you intended to? Yes or no? Is there an inability to concentrate due to alcohol cravings? Do you continue to drink despite negative consequences to your family or friends? Do you find yourself in dangerous or harmful situations because of your drinking? That's 4 of them. And there's 11 that are exactly sort of set up very objectively like that. So if you check off 2 to 3 of those boxes, they say you have mild AUD, 4 to 5 is going to be moderate, and then 6 or more is severe. So that's the DSM criteria. As of a few years ago, 6 to 7% of the U.S. adult population met that diagnosis. I'd imagine it's probably even more, after this past year. So then what about alcoholism? Alcoholism, alcoholic even, they're mostly non-medical terms now. Like if you see your doctor, for example, about your drinking, she's not going to diagnose you as an alcoholic, okay? She's going to use the symptoms in the DSM-5 to say that you meet the criteria for alcohol use disorder, either mild, moderate, or severe, and this is what I recommend that you do about it, But those terms are still used in a few different contexts, like clinically, for example, like alcoholism can still represent the severe form of AUD, okay, like a score of 6 or more. So you could say that everyone suffering from alcoholism has AUD, but not everybody with AUD is suffering from alcoholism. But mostly, in my opinion, those terms, alcoholism and alcoholic, they're going to live forever in the culture. And the main reason is that the most popular and common long-term treatment for alcoholism is AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. And all 100,000 of these AA groups across the entire globe operate out of that same, basic textbook. And those words are used over and over. So they're not going anywhere in our culture. Also, there's a certain antipathy or opposition in these groups towards psychiatry sometimes, even mainstream medicine at times. For example, if they held this giant AA meeting and then somebody proposed, okay, I think we should change everywhere in the book that it says alcoholism, we should change it to alcohol use disorder. The meeting would just erupt in laughter. It's not going to happen. And that goes actually even more so for the term alcoholic. Alcoholic is an interesting word. I don't know when the word was, first used. I mean, probably since human beings evolved language. It was probably one of the first couple words we learned. It was like food, water, alcoholic. Those were the first 3 words. But from that time up through the start of AA, the word alcoholic, it was mostly a derogatory term. Like an insult or like an accusation at the very least. It'd be like, damn it, look at you, you're an alcoholic. And then even up through today, for somebody who's not in AA, it would mostly be offensive or insulting for somebody else to call them an alcoholic. Whether it doesn't matter, your spouse, your neighbor, your child, your doctor even, it doesn't matter. It would be offensive. So nobody wants to be given that label by somebody else. But what happened in AA is that the word kind of got spun around into this term of empowerment. Classically, before somebody speaks, they'll say, hi, my name is so-and-so, and I'm an alcoholic, right? So whether they've been there for 2 days or, 50 years, it's kind of, it's basically built into the healing process in that program. If you can identify it, well, now at least we can go somewhere from there, So for this group, okay, so for people that are sober in AA, it's almost in a strange way, it would be offensive for someone to suggest that you're not an alcoholic. There's this guy that I heard talk one time, and he said the worst character assassination you can do to somebody in AA is gossip behind their back, and you can say see that guy Bob over there? I don't even think that he's really an alcoholic. That would be the worst thing you could say about him. So in that sense, the word alcoholic is very personal to the individual, and it's not a word that anybody else should be responsible for giving to someone else. There are lots of people with milder forms of AUD that wouldn't and shouldn't accept that term. And there's a lot of people in AA who own that diagnosis and kind of use it to empower them. So context really, really matters for that word. Okay, that's my breakdown of alcoholism, alcoholic, alcohol use disorder. It's not that one's right and the others are wrong. There's a time and place for both. None of these phrases are leaving the culture anytime soon. I think that they're really here to stay. That's the gist of it. I'm sure that I'm, forgetting some stuff, but leave a comment and let me know your thoughts.